Good morning, everyone. How are you doing? Good, wonderful. Hey, if I've never met you before or had the chance to say hello, my name is TJ, and as Brad said earlier, I am the student pastor here. So what that means is I get the honor and privilege to lead a team of incredible leaders in our ministries for middle school and high school kids. And so if you have any idea, you're like, what does that look like? This picture pretty much sums up a lot of that. This is from our Nerf war. That was a lot. And so one of the most fun, exciting, while terrifying sights, give a bunch of middle school and high school kids Nerf blasters, and then you go out and attack them, and willingly they love to attack you. I remember this little side story. Went into a room over here and I had a giant blaster, and I'm like, I'm going to light them all up. Went in there. There were like 80 middle schoolers in that room. I don't even know how. I stood no chance. They're like, you're out, you're out, you're out. And I'm like, I got out like 8 times. And like by one little girl. It was nuts. But anyway, that's what I get to do. Love it. Love being a part of what God is doing in and through our church for middle school and high school students and their families. To get us started today, I've got a question for us to think on. I'm going to reflect and see if you have found yourself in a position or situation like I find myself many, many times. Have you ever been in a situation where what you had was not what you needed to do the task or job in front of you? Maybe it was you needed a screwdriver and you had like a weed whacker. Maybe you needed a pencil and all you had was a highlighter and one of those giant Sharpies that has like no purpose. Okay? For me, typically, those situations I find myself in commonly or it can be summed up into 3 kind of categories. The first one, anything mechanical. If you have an engine problem, do not come to me. Okay? For your sake, for mine, it's going to be really, really bad. Because I look around and I'm like, first, I have no idea what to do, and secondly, I look at what I have and I'm like, not a chance. Second one is anytime in the yard doing any kind of work with that doesn't include a mower or a weed whacker. I love using a weed whacker. It's the most stress relieving thing. My cats stay inside. All the animals are like, no way. And then the third one is anything carpentry, wood, any of that stuff. So if you have those skills, wonderful. I'm completely jealous, and you can keep them to yourselves until I need them, okay? But I do have a specific solution, though, when I find myself in those situations. I call one specific friend. I've got a friend named Brian, we call him Hogan, who is this just man's man. I mean, he's tall. He just jumps into something. First off, he's got a beard that's envious in every degree. I think that's what we call his beard strength. But I call Hogan because we've coined the way that Hogan does stuff as Sasquatchery. We nickname Hogan as Sasquatch mainly because of the giant beard. But we're at times we're like, man, I really need some help here. First stop, Hogan. I call him up, I'm like, dude, I need some help. I need some Sasquatchery. Somehow he's always in his truck ready to go. He shows up at my house, I'm like, why are you here? But he's just ready to go. I mean, completely selfless, one of the most selfless individuals I know, and incredibly thoughtful to those around him and his friends. But that's my solution for a lot of stuff, is call Hogan, Sasquatchery will fix it, and then that's a relief for me. And I think we find ourselves in the story we'll see today really in those kind of situations for the nation of Israel, not necessarily needing Sasquatchery, even though that'd be kind of funny. But let's look, and we're going to open up our Bibles in Joshua chapter 6. So if you have those, if you have your church app, go ahead and open them up. Go in the YouVersion app, Joshua chapter 6, and we're going to see the nation of Israel as we've been following along, as they've crossed over the Jordan, they've gotten their camp and everything settled into what they will call home, and then that's where we pick up in Joshua chapter 6 today. And as Pastor Jason has been journeying through Joshua, we get to today, and this is the battle, okay? So this is where we find ourselves in Joshua chapter 6. And so some things to point out, though, one thing specifically before we jump into verse 1 is the city of Jericho knows about the nation of Israel, okay? Back in Joshua chapter 2, we see that when the nation of Israel sent spies into Jericho to find out and see what was going on, the king of Jericho comes and he finds out, and then the spies end up getting housed and hidden at a prostitute's named Rahab at her home. And then she later on gets saved for her and her family. And so the city of Jericho, it's not like all of a sudden the nation of Israel shows up and they go, oh, we're not expecting you, okay? They're there, they know they're there, okay? So Joshua chapter 6, verses 1 through 2, let's read them. Now Jericho was shut up inside and outside because of the people of Israel. None went out and none came in, and the Lord said to Joshua, see, I have given Jericho into your hand with its king and mighty men of valor. Let's pause here for a second. In verses 1 and 2, we see something about the city of Jericho. They are on full lockdown, okay? This is a desperation move. They're not letting anyone in and no one out. However, during this time and when battles, it wasn't uncommon with a city when they were under siege that what they would do is they would send out people to taunt their enemies, to harass them, to yell at them, to make fun of them, okay? Because think, they're in the city, they're fortified, and so they're sending people out to kind of just poke at them, to start hitting their spirits. Also, other times what would happen is that cities under siege would send out people secretly that were from them that needed help or supplies to go into to their enemies to kind of scope out and to find out what they were up against. Some things to know about the city of Jericho, because when we sit there and whether you're familiar or not, we go, how big is this city? Like, I have to be really, really concrete, because when I hear city of Jericho and walls, I think like Lord of the Rings walls, like giant suckers inside of a mountain, like that kind of stuff. But the city of Jericho, okay, the city of Jericho is somewhere between 4.5 to 6 acres. That's how big this city is. Tangibly, on our campus here at Community Church, from the gathering place, the sports fields, the side fields, everything, it's about 1/3 of our property here, okay? And the Israelites are coming out of being in the wilderness for 40 years, so they haven't encountered cities like this. They're not prepared for battles like this, so they're coming out, and this is the first thing they encounter. And also, they knew, even before Joshua was sending the spies, they have history, and they have specifically history of discouragement with the city of Jericho. Back in Numbers 13, when the nation of Israel, before they cross over the promised land, they send out spies. Joshua and Caleb were a part of that party, and they come back. They're saying how big the people were and how fortified the cities were. So that's kind of how we can understand. That's what the scene is where we pick up here in Joshua 6. So let's continue reading in verses 3. We're going to read verses 3 through 11. You shall march around the city with all the men of war going around the city once. Thus you shall do for 6 days. 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. On the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. And when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, when you hear the sound of the trumpet, then all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat. And the people shall go up, everyone straight before him. So Joshua the son of Nun called the priests and said to them, take up the ark of the covenant, and let 7 priests bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord. And he said to the people, go forward, march around the city, and let the armed men pass on before the ark of the Lord. Verse 8. And just as Joshua had commanded the people, the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the Lord went forward, blowing the trumpets with the ark of the Lord, with the ark of the covenant of the Lord following them. The armed men were walking before the priests who were blowing the trumpets, and the rear guard was walking after the ark while the trumpets blew continually. But Joshua commanded the people, you shall not shout or make your voice heard, neither shall any word go out of your mouth until the day I tell you to shout. Then you shall shout. So he caused the ark of the Lord to encircle the city, going about at once, and they came into the camp and spent the night in the camp. So here we see the plan. Verse 3, plan, march around the city. Once each day for the first 6 days, and on the 7th day, march around it 7 times. That's the plan in front of them. Coming out of the wilderness, that's what they hear from the Lord as this is how we're going to conquer the city that's in front of us. He also gives specific details. 7 priests with ram's horns in front of the ark, then the ark of the covenant behind them, and armed men in front of the priests, and then a rear guard behind the ark of the covenant. All of those detail, what that shows, they're ready to fight. They know there's going to be a battle. They know they are going to have to fight. Okay? Because of, way you can see how they're encircling kind of before and after the priests and the ark. Then Joshua gives this command in verse 10 and 11 to not shout or make their voice heard. One commentator said that this would be merely for the nation of Israel to preserve their voice, to make a drastic contrast between the circling and then what would happen on day 7. And typically in battle, what would happen is that a nation would go around, there'd be the blowing of a horn and then a battle cry. You see that in typical movies. They kind of whatever. Lord of the Rings, anything. They do that and then they go out. That's what we do at middle school camp. They get out of the band and they go, that's how they know, people know they're here. They're like, ah, and they run. All camp staff goes, ah, that way, right? But here, in these commands, there's no taunting of Jericho. There's no taunting of the city that they're about to attack. And one commentator, I loved how they described this. He said he describes this as a solemn Yahweh war. One that nation would eventually enjoy their joyous victory shout, but only on the day that Joshua orders. It's a different type of battle. So that's the first day. Then in verses 12 through 14, we see days 2 through 6. They're kind of summed up. And they just go out, they circle, they come back. Same thing, same routine, same plan. Day 7, we get a really zoomed in account of what happened. So let's look at verse 15. Let's finish out the chapter, verses 15 through 27. On the 7th day, they rose early at the dawn of day and marched around the city in the same manner 7 times. It was only on that day that they marched around the city 7 times. And at the 7th time, when the priests had blown the trumpets, Joshua said to the people, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city. And the city and all that is within it shall be devoted to the Lord for destruction. Only Rahab the prostitute and all who are with her in her house shall live, because she hid the messengers whom we sent. But you, keep yourselves from the things devoted to destruction, lest when you have devoted them, you take any of the devoted things and make the camp of Israel a thing for destruction and bring trouble upon it. But all silver and gold and every vessel of bronze and iron are holy to the Lord. They shall go into the treasury of the Lord." So the people shouted, and the trumpets were blown. As soon as the people heard the sound of the trumpet, the people shouted with a great shout, and the wall fell down flat, so that the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they captured the city. Then they devoted all the city to destruction, both men and women, young and old, oxen, sheep, and donkeys with the edge of the sword. But to the 2 men who had spied out the land, Joshua said, "Go into the prostitute's house and bring out from there the women and all who belong to her, as you swore to her." So the young men who had been spies went in and brought out Rahab and her father and mother and brothers and all who belonged to her. And they brought out all her relatives and put them outside the camp of Israel. And they burned the city with fire and everything in it. Only the silver and gold and the vessels of bronze and iron they put into the treasury of the house of the Lord. But Rahab the prostitute and her father's household and all who belonged to her, Joshua saved alive. And she has lived in Israel to this day because she hid the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. Joshua laid an oath on them at that time, saying, "Cursed be before the Lord be the man who rises up and rebuilds this city, Jericho. At the cost of his firstborn shall he lay its foundation, and at the cost of his youngest son shall he set up its gates." So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame was in all of the land. Verse 15, we see a little bit change here. It says that little detail. It says that they get up earlier, probably because now the plan's different this day, right? They have a little bit more to do, a little bit more to organize and to get done. And this time they march around the city 7 times instead of once and going back to camp. Still silent though, with only the sounds of the trumpets and the ram's horns being blown. Verses 16 through 19, though, we see Joshua stop, and when he gives the command to shout, he doesn't just say shout, and then they shout, walk him down. He says shout, but then he continues to talk to the nation of Israel and give them commands and give them instruction. A few things, one of the things he says in verse 16, it says, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." This is a very similar statement back in verse 2 in chapter 6, when it says that the city was devoted, that it was given over to them. This is God reminding the nation of Israel, I am the one. Always remember that this land was my gift to you. Verses 17 and 19, we see another statement here. Devoted to the Lord. Jericho was the nation of Israel's first battle in this new land. And throughout Scripture, we see this common value of the firsts or the first fruits. And whether it was livestock, harvest, anything, that you were to first give those things to the Lord, because as a reminder that He is the one that gave them to you in the first place. In our world today, that's where a lot of times where we get the value of tithing. Give that first to Him because He's the one that gave it to us. So it's the same thing here with the city. Then verse 18, in your app, in your Bible, whatever, highlight, circle, note it, okay? Whatever, remember this verse. Keep yourself from the things devoted to destruction. God knew that the things behind the walls for them are not going to be good for them. Maybe going, why? Let's think for a second. They just come out of the wilderness for 40 years. This is the first civilization that they see and experience. What's behind those walls? We see some things in there: gold, silver, bronze, iron, livestock, shelter, security, protection, goods, bread. I mean, all these things. And the nation of Israel has been coming out of the wilderness for 40 years. So at times, a lot of times they're on necessities, barely surviving. Making this real for a second. Vision, you're coming back from 40 years being away from civilization. You show up at Target or Walmart. What command do you think someone's going to give you as guidance before you walk in those doors? Hey, TJ, don't go stuff your face in Doritos and queso. It's going to lead you to destruction. I don't care. Don't give me the avocados. Don't give me kale. Give me the Doritos. Is it good for me? No way. It's not good for me now, right? Let alone when I come back. Same idea here. And this had to be one of the most important statements for the nation of Israel to hear. And it's some of the last commands that Joshua gives them before the command to shout and the walls come down. Then in verse 20 and 21, we see what happens. All of that, everything leading up from verses 1 through 19 are all in preparation, kind of setting the scene, understanding what's happening. 2 verses, it's all summed up, right? When it says that they shout, the trumpets were blown, the people were shouting, they shout with a great shout, and the walls fall flat. Then everything in it destroyed. And then we see in the next few verses the fulfilling of the promise to save Rahab and her family for hiding the messengers when they came to spy out the land. And then in verse 27, we see an even higher rise of Joshua. I love how it says, and his fame was in all the land. It's this massive, it's this vastness. People know now who Joshua and the nation of Israel is, who they are. The reason why I wanted to take some time and walking through that is it kind of sets, and we can look at it whether you have experience and exposure to the story of Jericho or whether you don't. For me, I do. Growing up in church, always at church, didn't mean necessarily I had a relationship with Jesus, little side thing, but I went to VBS, so I heard the story of Jericho through Sunday school, through Vacation Bible School, through my grandparents, whatever it was. But in preparation of this, and now I've looked at it, I've started to ask questions, and I'm like, I want to know what it would feel like externally seeing things happening or internally feeling the emotions that they feel. For Joshua, I wonder what his initial thoughts were when he heard the plan from God. He goes and he asks God a lot of times like what we do, saying, God, what do you have? And he's like, what's the plan? And he said, Joshua, I want you to march around the city once for 6 days straight, go back to camp, not saying a word, not doing anything. A little weird. Okay, sure. And then the 7th day, he says, and now I want you to circle it 7 times, and then I want you to shout, and the walls are going to come down. Yeah, okay. Literally, that's why when Jason, for this one, I was so excited to teach this because this literally sounds like a plan I give my middle schoolers. I'm not trusting you with darts and arrows. No way. March around and use your God-given loud mouth that you love to use. We will strike terror in everyone. Yeah, we will. And it's awesome. I wonder, though, for Joshua, when he gives the command, when he hears that, when he gives it to the nation of Israel, how fast did the encouraging words In Joshua 1, when God tells him, he said, Joshua, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid, for I will be with you wherever you go. How important these words would be for him when he is telling the nation of Israel every day when he's waking up, and then every day he goes back to camp after not saying a word and just walking. In the nation of Israel, I wonder what the emotions were when they finally go into battle. They go, all right, let's assemble. We saw the plan of how they were to assemble, and then now let's march, let's go. The fear, the anticipation for them to walk around. But then here in the plan, I see two things. One, the great confidence and faith for them to do it, not talking. But then also the opportunity that when they would get back to camp, for them to assemble in their tribes and talk. That's not the way I do it. That's a silly plan. That's irrational. That's dumb. That's preposterous. That's weird. How is that going to work? What was their state of faith when they walked around and then went back to camp? What was their state of mind when they finally got in day 7 when Joshua said, shout? What was their state of mind after the previous 6 days to shout? And then the walls come down, and then they see everything in there. The gold, the silver, the food, the shelter, the safety, the protection, and so many other things that they had been without. And again, how great faith, but then also the opportunity for their eyes to shift and their eyes to begin to wander. And then the people of Jericho. This was I got to be honest, this is one of the most interesting viewpoints, at least for me. For you, you may be like, who cares? But let's just keep going. Here these people have such great fear that they've shut down and they're on lockdown of what's happening outside the walls, yet confidence in their walls and security at the same time. They see this group of people walking around, assembling, and then starting to walk around. Day 1 and day 2, what posture and what attitude do you think they have? Oh, I guarantee the archers, the bows are drawn and the arrows are out. The shields are out, the swords are out. They're at the gates and they're going, let's go. It's happening today. Day 1, they walk back to camp. What was that about? We'll go home. Next day, they wake up, same thing. I think they probably had the same attitude, but what do you think the attitude was on day 3 through 6? See, for me, one of the things I think of is that for the city of Jericho, seeing the nation of Israel circle 6 days in a row, one time, and going back to camp would absolutely demoralize them. They would begin to lose. It'd be so easy for them to lose hope and lose confidence in what was in front of them. And also, it would be really, really easy for them to get relaxed and casual, wouldn't it? Oh, here they go again. I got to envision that probably by day 7, the bows are not drawn. Their sandals aren't laced up. I mean, the shields, they have no idea. I mean, they're probably at home. They're like, well, I have no idea where it's at, right? So when looking at the story through these 3 lenses, I got to ask you the same question I asked myself. Where do I resonate? Where do I look at and I go, I understand how they feel because I feel that right now in my life. I feel that in my family, maybe in my personal relationship with God. And I find myself understanding all 3 of them, but one of them really sticks out specifically. When I look at Joshua and the nation of Israel, I think a lot, I look at that and I go, man, I understand. I go, I want to hear from God. I want to hear his plan. I want to hear what he wants to do in and through me and in our church, in our community. Yet, you and I at times, when we hear God's plan, we go, that's a little crazy. That's a little irrational. That doesn't make sense. That's not the way I do it. That's illogical. There's no way that in our natural world that can happen. We just look at it and we just begin tearing down the plan because of our minds and our doubts. Maybe God's methods for you of how he wants you to treat people in your life, maybe the way that he wants you to interact with your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your fiance, your neighbors, or maybe even the way that he wants you to treat others seems absolutely ridiculous. Maybe the methods when God's plan for you of how he wants you to set your schedule, your priorities, the things he wants you to say yes, the things he wants you to say no to, run absolutely counter to what the world says is important and is the norm. And so because of that, it's like, no way, it's not even possible in the world I live in. And maybe God's way for the way that he wants to get close to you, maybe the way that he wants to reveal himself to you, maybe the way that he wants you to begin to see see yourself the way that he sees you seems intrusive or way too much work, or it's not going to make an impact. And I understand that those three examples assume that we want to hear and we care. Some of us in the room we go, there's no need. I've seen all that God's going to do. I don't even need him. Or maybe it's like, why does it matter? For me to submit, is it worth it? See, I get it because I find myself asking those same questions and feeling that same tug of pride. When I have God's plan and then I look at it in comparison to what I may think. However, the question I ask myself is the same question that I would ask you. Are you trusting God in what he's asking you to in every step along in the journey, especially when it seems odd, illogical, irrational, and not the way you do it? Am I trusting him when he says, TJ, all I want you to do is shout? Instead, I go, no, that's not going to do anything. And he says, I just want you to shout. I want you to do this. See, a lot of times we don't believe him when he says something illogical, irrational, and not the way we do it, even though he's going, this is the best thing for you, because I always have the best for you in mind. I am always for you. So my plan is for you. Now, I've got to be honest, though, through this other lens, I see myself a lot within Joshua and the nation of Israel. But I feel a lot more time, especially, I think probably just maybe phase of life, but I resonate with the people of Jericho. And when I first look at this, I used to look at the city of Jericho and I'd be like, oh, they're a completely helpless nation. Like, they're going to get up against God. Verse 2, he's like, it's already done. Like, the city's already in your hands, so they're absolutely helpless. I don't see that as much. I see the people of Jericho as becoming relaxed throughout the 6 days of the Israelites marching and then going back to camp, them just losing energy, hope, anticipation, attention, confidence, while the Israelites were getting ready for their plan. They were executing their plan, and the people of Jericho, by the time day 7 comes around, they're just like, meh, we've lost attention. They're not going to do anything. Nothing's going to happen. See, when it comes to trusting God's plan, it's really easy. It's much easier to do that on day 1 and 2, right? We hear it. We're like the nation of Israel. We got a plan. Woo! Okay? All you type A's that are like, we need a plan. Nation of Israel, you're like, thank you. But then you immediately go into that's not going to work, right? And we go and we hear the plan on the day 1 and 2, and we begin to take steps and we do that. But what happens when it seems like all we are experiencing over and over again is no change and is the same thing repetitive, and it's like nothing's happening. The prayers that you're saying, the prayers that you're praying aren't getting answered. The things that you're hoping are going to change and improve in your life aren't improving or changing. Maybe they're actually even getting worse. Maybe the growth that you want to see in yourself, the steps that you're taking for yourself, your family, don't seem like there's really anything happening. So why even bother at all? See, the reason why this stuck out to me so much is because I believe that you and I, we live in a world and we're surrounded in our culture by the lack of follow-through and intentional attention. We're always looking for ways to improve and get the fastest results possible. Even if that comes at the cost of starting a plan, nope, not working, bam, new plan. Instead of following through and completing and trusting and going. We see it in conversations with people. The conversation may not be going any place. We get a vibration on our watch or on our phone. Attention, diverted, because we hope that the other one is going to be better. It's going to captivate us, or it's going to be better. It's going to be more important than what's right in front of me. Maybe I even see it in times in my own life and in the world around me where people and families will take the bait of the short-term happiness, but yet they will sacrifice a long-term goal and value that they want to see happen in themselves or their families. There's a conflict, there's a rub, and then we just take that bait and go, short-term happiness, this is awesome, but it comes at the cost of just continually, time after time, not choosing to stay and stick the plan through for the long-term value that's going to take root and produce much better fruit. See, the people of Jericho are seeing nothing change. So instead of being ready for something to happen, secure in their wall and what they know, what happens? Walls come down and they're destroyed. It says that the city was burned. The only things that are saved from that is Rahab and her family. So here's the question. Here's a question for you and the question for me as we learn from the people of Jericho. Am I trusting God's plan through the end, or do I start to lose hope and confidence to a point where I'm not ready when God moves? What do I miss out on not being ready? What do I miss out on being comfortable or secure? What do I miss out by not being expectant or anticipating for anything to happen? What are the walls in your life and in my life that need to come down, that are currently in front of you, that God is asking you to start marching around and trusting Him with each step that something's about to happen? Maybe it's your actions at school or at home with your family to change. Maybe it's the things that you see most important in life to get reprioritized, to get reshifted, to get flipped completely upside down to what God wants to be most important in your life. Maybe it's the desire to want and or need God's plan in your life at all, period. See, along the journey, before the walls come down, I believe that God shares with us, and we see through the people of Jericho and the people of Israel the same thing. When Joshua tells them the command to keep your eyes from the things of destruction before the walls come down, that he looks at me and he says, TJ, I want you to encircle this and I want you to trust me. I want you to be anticipating every day what's about to happen. Don't lose sight, don't get relaxed, don't get comfortable. But when the walls come down, something's going to be on the other side that's going to distract you, that's going to pull your eyes and shift your eyes from me. Don't take the bait. Keep your eyes focused on me. How interesting is that? I mean, take for a second, think about this. They encircled the place for 7 days. They shouted, the walls come down. What's the most important the command that they tell them? Keep your eyes from the things of destruction. Not at all, because they're sitting there going, they're going to be completely bypassed the fact that they yelled and a wall came down, right? That's the command that God gives them. Keep your eyes and keep yourselves from the things of destruction. Because he's telling them, he's like, I want you to remember that the wall came down to begin with. Keep your eyes focused on me. See, you and I, that's hard to do because the fear and the doubt are the things that are on the other side of the wall or that prohibit us from stop marching to begin with. Because we sit there, we're like, why? It's not gonna pay off. It's not worth the cost for whatever it's gonna cost me to continually do things and trust God's plan. I'm gonna look different to culture. My family, what's gonna happen to it? But God's going, I want you to trust me. Instead of looking at the things of destruction that are around us. This is the beautiful thing, is that he tells them in verse 2, he's like, I've already given you the city. Before he gives them the plan, he's like, it's already won. And for us, for you and I, and the plans, and when we go to God and ask him, say, God, reveal your plan and show it to me, we have confidence in that because in Colossians 2, I love this verse. Colossians 2:15, it says this, He, God, disarmed the rulers and authorities and put them to open shame by triumphing over them in him, in Jesus. It's already won. I hate losing. And the fact of losing or failing a lot of times prohibits me from listening and trusting God in his plan. But he tells me and he tells you, it's already won because of what I did in Jesus. Nothing, when I tell you the plan, it's good because I'm a good father. I'm a good God. I give good and perfect things to all of my children. So my plan is not going to lead you to losing. It's always going to lead you to winning because I've already won. And think about how incredible this was for Joshua. That verse 2, when it says that I've already given you the city. Because over and over again after Jericho, in Joshua chapter 12, the very end of that, in verse 24, it says these few words that a lot of times we may completely just skip over. They're kind of recounting what has happened in their battles and what's happened after Jericho. It says this, in all 31 kings. This shows that God told the nation of Israel and was faithful to them. He says, trust my plan, not just with Jericho, trust my plan over and over and over again. And I sit there and I think, for Joshua, when he wakes up every day, he sits there and he says, God, do it again. What's your plan? Do it again. Do it again and do it again. For you and I, that gives us great confidence, knowing that God is always about moving, He's always about growing, and allowing us to allow Him to tear down the walls that are in front of us, but also not just tear down the wall and go, hey, cool, I'm done. He also goes, okay, TJ, I want you to keep moving. We got more territory to conquer. There's going to be a new wall in front of you. I'm going to do it again. Here's my plan. Even as irrational, illogical, and silly as the first one was. See, friends, don't allow the pride, the different plans and the costs, or what's on the other side of the wall, or thinking, is it worth it, to stop us and for us to shift our eyes and our focus off of God. Because the plans that He asks, the plans that He gives us when we go to Him and say, God, I want direction in my life and in my family, they're good plans and they're victorious plans. We don't ever have to doubt, is it going to lead me to victory? He says, yes, because of what I did in Jesus. So as we take communion today, remembering the sacrifice that Jesus gave and shed for us, when we take the bread symbolizing His body and the cup symbolizing His blood for us, let it be a reminder for us that sacrifice led to the ultimate victory, that you and I can stand certain and we can stand on solid ground, the best foundation, and say that God wants us to do this plan in my life. And it's going to lead me to victory. And then I get done, He's going to say, TJ, get up, celebrate, let's do it again. Don't take for a minute of thinking about what's after church or what's later this afternoon, or begin to sit there and go, it's illogical, it's crazy, or the fear to hold you back. And as you come and as you take the elements and go back to your seat, I've got two questions I want to ask you to think on. The first one is this: what seems undoable for God to do in and through my life, my family, my children, my school, my workplace, and my church? What is that thing that first off you may be like, there's no wall, I'm good, life's awesome, wonderful. Like, I'm not saying but I think a lot of times we can get complacent and comfortable, that we stop looking for stuff. God's going, I want you to keep going. Let's take more territory. And then the second is this: what is it that is pulling my focus and eyes off of allowing that to happen? Because God, friends, wants us to do it over and over again. He wants to keep moving us and growing us. And then when you finish, sit there and ask and say, God, would you help me take the next step in front of me? The nation of Israel, that march was one step at a time, friends. Day after day, when it seemed impossible and hard. What is that step? Ask Him, say, God, reveal that step in front of me. Let's pray. God, we thank you so much for your goodness and for your faithfulness, that it's always leading us to victory. So God, help us. Help us see the steps in front of us that you want us to take. And God, I pray that I pray that they are illogical and irrational and crazy steps in our mind, because when you give us steps like that, big things happen. And so God, that's what you want for us. That's what I want for me. That's what I want for our church and for your people, is for you to do incredible things in our lives and to do it over and over again. So speak to us. Reveal yourself to us. God, I pray this in your name. Amen.